The mine's air was thick with the acrid stench of sulfur and sweat. The clang of pickaxes against stone echoed endlessly, a rhythm of suffering maintained by the overseers who loomed overhead, watching, waiting, ready to strike at the first sign of defiance. Marcus Voss had long since stopped flinching at the crack of an electro-whip. Pain was a language every human slave understood, but fear, that had been beaten out of him years ago. The Thalzer called this world Velrath III, a mining colony choking on its own dust. For the past 15 years, Voss had broken his body here, hauling raw ore under the scalding twin suns. His muscles, thick as industrial cables, bore the scars of years of toil. His body was a monument to human endurance, denser bones, stronger sinew, forged under the relentless oppression of their alien masters. But today was different. Today, something inside him snapped. A cry rang out from across the cavern. Voss turned to see a young worker, barely more than a boy, trembling beneath the glare of Overseer Zorkan. The Thalzer noble was lean and insectoid, his violet carapace gleaming under the dim light. He held a plasma baton in one spindly hand, its tip glowing red-hot. "You are too slow, filth," Zorkan hissed. "You think we have time for weakness." The boy, barely able to stand, asked, I just need a moment. A moment." The Overseer laughed, a grating, alien sound. "Then allow me to grant you an eternity." He plunged the plasma baton forward. A hand shot out. Voss moved without thinking. His massive fingers wrapped around Zorkan's wrist, stopping the baton inches from the boy's chest. The alien's multifaceted eyes widened in disbelief. "Release me, slave," Zorkan screeched, his mandibles clicking furiously. "You dare touch your master." Silence fell across the cavern. The other human workers froze, barely breathing. No one touched the overseers. Ever. Voss tightened his grip. Bones cracked. The Thalzer's screams filled the mine. "You shouldn't have done that," Voss said, his voice steady, cold. With one swift motion, he ripped the alien's arm clean from its socket. Zorkan shrieked, collapsing to the ground as violet blood sprayed across the dust. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd, disbelief and awe mixing in their wide-eyed stares. Voss stepped forward, towering over the writhing overseer. "For years, we've broken our backs for you. For years, we've suffered. And for what? To be killed like animals when you grow bored." His voice thundered through the chamber. He turned, meeting the eyes of his fellow slaves. "No more." A murmur swept through the humans. Some stepped forward, fists clenched, shoulders squared. The air was thick with something new, something dangerous. The first spark of rebellion. Outside, the alarms began to wail. The Thalzer would come. But for the first time, humanity would not bow. The alarms howled through the mine shafts, a high-pitched wail that sent tremors through the stone. The Thalzer enforcers would arrive within minutes, plasma rifles primed, ready to turn every human in sight into smoldering corpses. Voss stood over the still-twitching corpse of Overseer Zorkan, his massive chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate breaths. Around him, the human workers, slaves no longer, looked to him, their faces torn between fear and something long buried beneath years of servitude. "Hope. Listen to me," Voss growled, his voice cutting through the blaring sirens. "We've spent our lives breaking rock for creatures that see us as nothing more than animals. They rule us with whips and guns, but what happens when we stop obeying? What happens when we fight back?" The workers exchanged glances. A few clenched their fists. Others nodded slowly. "We die," an older man muttered. "No," Voss said. "We survive. We take what's ours. We make them fear us." Before anyone could answer, the Thalzer enforcers arrived. The cavern entrance flashed with blue light as 3 insectoid soldiers stormed in, clad in sleek black armor, their plasma rifles humming. Their faceless helmets swept over the scene. Overseer dead, humans standing, unshackled. The lead enforcer raised his rifle. "All slaves, down on your knees. You will." Voss moved first. He lunged like a predator, closing the distance before the alien could fire. His massive fist caved in the enforcer's chest plate with a sickening crunch. The alien convulsed as Voss seized his rifle and, without hesitation, turned it on the remaining two. A single squeeze of the trigger. A bolt of searing blue energy burned a hole through the second enforcer's skull. The last alien tried to retreat. Too late. The human workers swarmed him. Tools turned into weapons, their rage a living thing. Screams filled the cavern as they ripped the enforcer apart, piece by bloody piece. Voss lowered the stolen rifle, watching as the men and women who had spent their lives broken and beaten now stood over the corpse of their oppressors. There was no fear in their eyes anymore, only fire. "We're done kneeling," Voss said. "We're taking this mine. We're taking this world." Someone in the crowd let out a ragged cheer. Another joined. Then another. Soon, the mine echoed with the roar of an uprising. One rebellion alone wouldn't be enough. The Thalzir had an empire spanning thousands of worlds. They had war fleets, orbital bombardment cannons, entire legions bred for extermination. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. The giants of Earth had awoken, and they were ready to burn the stars. The fires of rebellion spread fast. Within hours, the mines of Velrath III fell into human hands. Overseers were slaughtered, their corpses strung up as warnings. The few Thalzir who surrendered were forced to work the mines, a poetic reversal of fate. But Voss knew it wouldn't last. The Dominion would come. And when they did, they wouldn't take prisoners. Voss gathered his fighters, men and women who had spent their entire lives breaking rock, their bodies forged by hardship. Now, they were something more. Soldiers, titans, armed with stolen plasma rifles and repurposed mining exosuits, they prepared for the inevitable retaliation. But Voss had a different plan. "We're not going to wait for them to crush us," he said, addressing his people from the Overseer's command station. "We need to take the fight to them. And that means getting off this rock." A murmur ran through the crowd. Escaping the planet was impossible. The skies were patrolled by Thalzir sentry drones, and the only spaceport was heavily fortified. But Voss wasn't aiming for the spaceport. He pointed to a holographic map, displaying an orbital shipyard that hung high above Velrath III. "That's our target. A Dominion warship is docked there, the Black Leviathan. It's not just a ship, it's a weapon, and we're going to steal it." The room fell silent. Then one voice spoke. "You're insane." A woman stepped forward. Sela Korin, a former engineer who had spent years repairing Thalzir machinery. Her eyes, sharp as a razor's edge, bore into Voss. "You're talking about hijacking a Dominion dreadnought," she said. "With what?" "Mining drills and stolen rifles." Voss grinned. "We've survived worse." Sela exhaled, rubbing her temples. "Even if we get on board, we don't have pilots." "We don't need pilots," Voss said. "We have Prometheus." At the mention of the name, the crowd stiffened. Prometheus was a legend among the enslaved humans, an eye rumored to be hidden in the darkest corners of the Dominion's archives. A relic of Earth's lost glory, wiped from history when the Thalzir conquered them. But Prometheus wasn't a myth. Voss had found it. Before the uprising, a dying worker had slipped him a data chip, whispering, "Humanity's last fire still burns." When Voss had activated it, a voice, cold, calculating, undeniably human, had spoken. Designation, Prometheus, Earth's last weapon, awaiting orders. Now that weapon would guide them. Sela's resistance faded. She nodded. "Then we'd better get moving before the Thalzir send a fleet." Voss turned to his people. "This is our chance. If we take that ship, we're not just escaping. We're declaring war." The crowd erupted in a roar. The titans of Earth were ready, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to fear humanity. The attack on the orbital shipyard was a high-risk gamble. No one had ever attempted to hijack a Dominion dreadnought, especially one as heavily protected as the Black Leviathan. The shipyard was surrounded by a deadly array of automated defense turrets, and its docking bays were guarded by elite Thalzir enforcers who would rather see the ship destroyed than let it fall into the hands of the rebels. But Voss wasn't deterred. His team, his family now, had already crossed impossible odds, and they were hungry for more. They made their move in the dead of night, under the cover of a lunar eclipse that cast the shipyard in shadow. Sela Korin, her eyes narrowed in concentration, guided their stealth shuttle through the asteroid belt, dodging minefields and enemy patrols. They'd moved like ghosts, relying on their knowledge of Thalzir systems and a heavy dose of luck. ETA, 5 minutes to entry point, Sela reported, her voice steady despite the pressure. Voss stood in the shuttle's hold, surrounded by a dozen armed rebels, each one ready to sacrifice everything for the cause. His eyes met theirs, and in that moment he knew. This was no longer just about survival. It was about rewriting the stars themselves. "Once we board, we take the bridge," Voss said, his voice low but commanding. "We control the ship, we control the war. And no matter what, we stay together." The shuttle shuddered as they breached the shipyard's magnetic fields. The alarms didn't blare, yet, but the tension in the air was suffocating. Sela's fingers danced over the controls, guiding them into a narrow docking bay. The shuttle scraped against the hull, locking in place. Voss was the first to move. He grabbed his rifle and gestured for the others to follow. The door hissed open, revealing the vast, cold expanse of the shipyard's interior. The Black Leviathan loomed ahead, massive, its dark hull glistening like a living thing. A single Thalzir guard stood at the entrance to the ship's docking bay. He never had a chance. Voss shot him in the head with a single, clean shot. The guard's body collapsed in a heap, his blood splattering across the floor. "Move," Voss barked. The team surged forward, weapons raised, ready for anything. They passed through empty hallways, navigating the vessel's labyrinthine interior. The sound of their footsteps was deafening in the eerie silence. As they neared the central control room, however, the first of the Thalzir elite arrived. 5 soldiers, their sleek armor glowing under the ship's artificial lights, blocked the corridor. The leader of the squad, a towering Thalzir with heavy cybernetic enhancements, sneered at Voss. "You're brave for a slave, but this is where your revolt ends." Voss smirked. "You're mistaken." He didn't even wait for them to move. With a roar, he charged. The Thalzir tried to raise their weapons, but Voss was faster. His fist connected with the leader's chest, sending the alien flying backward into the walls with a sickening crunch. The rest of the squad hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was enough. Humanity's rage, once controlled and suppressed, now surged free. The rebels tore through the Thalzir forces with brutal efficiency, their strength unmatched. Voss and his fighters didn't kill, they destroyed. The Thalzir were nothing but brittle, fragile creatures before the might of Earth's giants. When the last alien fell, Voss stood over the wreckage, bloody but unbowed. He turned to his team. "Let's take this ship." The Black Leviathan was theirs. Voss stood on the bridge, his boots echoing in the silence. His hand gripped the control panel, his mind racing through the coordinates Prometheus had fed him. Earth, his home, was in their sights. "Status report," Voss said, turning to Sela, who was hunched over the command console. "Everything's locked in," Sela replied, her fingers flying across the controls. "We're in command of the ship. Weapons are fully charged, shields are operational, and the Fury cannon is ready for fire." She paused, glancing at Voss. "But we're not going to be alone for long." She was right. The Thalzir didn't take defeat lying down. Within moments of Voss seizing control of the Leviathan, a fleet of Dominion warships appeared in their sensors. The largest among them was the Judgment, a massive flagship that had once served as the executioner of rebellious planets. It now turned its guns toward the Leviathan, preparing to burn it to cinders. "We're outnumbered," Sela said, her voice tight. "But we have the advantage of surprise, and our size." "Not just our size," Voss growled, his eyes hardening. "We have human rage. Let's see if they're ready for it." He slammed his fist into the tactical console, signaling the crew to prepare for battle. The first shot came from the Judgment, a brilliant flash of blue energy, aimed directly at the Black Leviathan's heart. But Voss was faster. He gritted his teeth and evasive maneuvers kicked in, the giant ship twisting through space like a phantom. The energy blast missed, but the sheer power of the shot sent ripples through the surrounding fleet. "Return fire," Voss ordered. "Target their weapons systems." The Leviathan's guns roared to life. Every turret and missile launcher, powered by human ingenuity and Prometheus's calculations, unleashed a storm of destruction. The Dominion ships were unprepared for the sheer brutality of the retaliation. On the screen, the Judgment's shields flickered and cracked. Explosions rippled across its hull, sending debris flying in every direction. Voss's teeth bared in a savage grin. The Dominion hadn't expected humans to fight with this kind of ferocity. Not with ships, not with technology, and most certainly not with their own bare hands. But Earth's giants didn't know the meaning of surrender. Suddenly, the comms crackled. A new voice, cold and commanding, broke through the static. "This is Executor Varnax, Supreme Commander of the Thalzur Dominion." The alien's voice snarled. "You are playing a dangerous game, human. You may have stolen my ship, but you will die for it." Voss's heart pounded. He'd heard of Varnax. Every human who had ever fought under the Thalzur's rule knew the name. Varnax was no mere warlord. He was a living legend. The Thalzur had sent their finest to crush the rebellion, and now Varnax himself would deal a final blow. "I don't fear you," Voss growled into the comms, his voice a low rumble. "And I'm not done yet." He turned to Sela. "Prepare the Fury cannon. We're going to show them how humanity fights." Sela's eyes gleamed. "Aye, Captain." The Fury cannon was a piece of lost human technology, a weapon once used to level continents, capable of breaking entire armies, splitting planets if needed. And it was fully charged. "Firing," Sela said. With a deafening boom, the cannon fired. The blast ripped through space, leaving a trail of light in its wake, striking the Judgment square in its reactor core. The result was immediate. The Judgment exploded in a cataclysmic burst, its massive hull disintegrating into a cloud of burning debris. Voss watched as the remnants of the Thalzur flagship drifted into the void. "We've just crippled the heart of their fleet," Sela said quietly, looking at the wreckage. Voss turned to his crew, his face cold. "We're not done yet. Earth is waiting." The destruction of the Judgment sent shockwaves through the Dominion fleet, but Voss knew it wouldn't be enough to halt them. The Thalzur were not a race to be easily intimidated, and the death of one ship, no matter how legendary, would not stop their war machine from advancing. "We've bought ourselves a moment," Voss said, his eyes scanning the viewports as the wreckage of the Judgment drifted in the cold expanse of space. "But now, the real fight begins." Sela, her brow furrowed in concentration, brought up a tactical map of the system. "We've crippled their flagship, but the Thalzur have already scrambled reinforcements. A dozen warships are already en route from the Taurus Rift. If we don't leave soon, we'll be surrounded." Voss clenched his fists. "And we won't be able to make it to Earth." He turned to Prometheus, whose voice echoed through the ship's systems. "Prometheus, initiate evasive maneuvers. We need to get to Hyperion Gate. Now." The AI responded without hesitation, calculating optimal trajectory. Evasive pattern locked in. Without warning, the Leviathan surged forward, plunging into a violent series of evasive maneuvers. The ship shuddered and groaned as it dodged incoming fire, but Voss wasn't worried. The Black Leviathan had been designed for war, and it was built to endure. The key was keeping ahead of the Thalzur reinforcements long enough to make it to the Hyperion Gate. the only stable route leading directly to Earth. "On your mark, Captain," Scylla said, her fingers flying across the console. "Once we enter the gate, we'll be in the heart of their territory." Voss nodded. "And that's where we make our stand. We'll take the fight to their homeworld." The ship's hull groaned again as another series of plasma bolts slammed into the Leviathan's shields. The Thulzir were relentless, their ships closing in from all sides. But Voss could see the fear in their movements now. They weren't prepared for the kind of fight humanity had just brought. A wave of energy passed over the Leviathan as it plunged into Hyperion Gate, the immense, ancient structure that connected distant star systems. The gate flickered for a moment, its massive rings rotating, and then they were through, into uncharted space. Voss's eyes narrowed as the unknown stretched out before them. For the first time, they were beyond Thulzir-controlled space, and they were heading straight toward the Dominion's heart. Scylla looked over at him. "Are you sure about this? We don't know what's waiting on the other side. We'll be in the heart of their empire. No reinforcements, no way to retreat." Voss stood tall, his fists clenched in determination. "We've been running from them for too long. It ends now. We're going to show the Dominion that we are not their slaves. We are humanity, and we will burn their empire to the ground." The crew roared in approval, a collective wave of defiance crashing through the ship. But even as Voss spoke those words, deep in the void, something darker stirred. The Dominion's true power was not just in their ships or soldiers. It was in the pursuit of annihilation, and the full weight of their wrath was closing in fast. The war was no longer a fight for freedom. It was a fight for survival. The black Leviathan hurtled through the Hyperion Gate, the swirling vortex of energy bending space itself. On the other side lay the heart of the Thulzir Dominion, their central hub, their ancient citadel, and the seat of their power. Voss stood at the bridge, hands gripping the tactical console as he stared into the cold, unfamiliar expanse. The stars here seemed darker, more suffocating, as if the very fabric of space was rejecting their presence. "Coordinates locked," Scylla reported, her eyes narrowed at the screen. "We're within striking distance of Eshtor, the Dominion's capital. Their defenses are immense. Then we'll take them down, one by one," Voss replied, his voice low and grim. The black Leviathan's engines roared as the ship powered through the void. Behind them, the remnants of the Thulzir fleet were still scrambling, but they were too far behind to catch them now. The escape through the Hyperion Gate had bought them some time, but they were about to face a new set of challenges. "They're closing in," Scylla added. "This system is heavily militarized. They'll send every warship, every fighter they have to stop us. We're on their turf now." Voss nodded, the weight of their mission settling on his shoulders. He'd led them this far, but this next phase would determine the fate of humanity. They were no longer fighting for survival. Now, they were fighting for the very soul of the galaxy. "Prepare for battle," Voss ordered, turning to his crew. "We're going to hit them hard and fast. We're not here to negotiate. We're here to destroy their heart." The crew went to work, checking systems, arming weapons, and preparing the Fury cannon for its final assault. Voss knew it would be their only chance to breach Eshtor's defenses, but the risk was enormous. One misstep, one wrong move, and they would be nothing more than a fleeting memory in the void. As they approached the heart of the Dominion's stronghold, a massive fleet of Dominion warships emerged from the shadows of the capital planet. There were no words, no hesitation. Only the sound of their weapons charging, and the unblinking cold of alien eyes that saw only one thing in humanity, an obstacle to be crushed. The black Leviathan shook as the first volley of enemy fire hit. The shields absorbed most of it, but the impact sent ripples through the ship. "Fury cannon at full charge," Scylla called out, "ready to fire on your command." Voss clenched his teeth, his mind racing. This was it. One shot. One moment. They had to make it count. Fire. The Fury cannon released its devastating blast, a torrent of pure energy that ripped through space Like a hammer smashing through glass, the first Dominion warship crumpled in its path, its shields and hull unable to withstand the sheer force. But the remaining fleet was not about to give in so easily. Fighters and bombers swarmed the Leviathan, their weapons lighting up the dark space around them. The ship rocked violently as they took fire from all directions. "We're too exposed," Sela shouted. "We need to get closer to the capital's defense grid. They're adapting. Our strategy is losing its edge." Voss's jaw tightened. They were entering the final phase now. Eshtor was just ahead, and the full might of the Dominion awaited them. But humanity had already proven its resilience. "We push forward," Voss commanded. "We break through." And as the first massive strike from the Dominion fleet came hurtling toward them, Voss knew. This battle would not just be about defeating the Thalzur. It would be about showing the universe that humanity was no longer the underdog. The final assault on Ishtar was upon them. The Black Leviathan had become a beacon of fury, a symbol of defiance against an empire that had enslaved their people for generations. The battle raged all around them, the stars themselves seeming to tremble as humanity's vengeance tore through the void. Voss stood at the helm, his hand steady on the console. His heart pounded in his chest, but his focus was absolute. They had come too far to falter now. They had made their stand, and now they would make the universe remember. The full weight of the Dominion fleet bore down on them. "They're adapting," Sela called out, her voice urgent as enemy fire bombarded their shields. "We can't keep this up for long." Voss didn't hesitate. "We don't need to." "Prepare to deploy Omega Protocol," Voss ordered, turning toward the back of the bridge. Sela's eyes widened. "That's a one-way ticket, Voss." "Are you?" "It's the only way to break through," he cut her off. "We destroy their command center, and we send a message they can't ignore." Sela's fingers hovered over her controls, and then she nodded, knowing there was no other choice. The Omega Protocol was a last resort measure, an ancient human protocol designed to overload the Leviathan's core and deliver an energy shockwave that would obliterate anything in its path. It was a nuclear option, and it had been a secret buried deep in the Black Leviathan systems, waiting for the moment of final desperation. But this wasn't desperation. This was defiance. As the countdown began, Voss felt the weight of what they were about to do. His mind raced with memories of Earth, of his family, of the ancestors whose bones lay buried beneath the soil of a world that had been lost to them. He thought of the countless lives that had been crushed under the Thalzur's boot and the legacy they had carried with them. And in his chest, something stirred, the fire of humanity's resilience. "Initiating Omega Protocol," Sela said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In 3, 2, 1. The ship lurched as the core came to life, its energy surging like a living beast. A pulse of bright white energy enveloped the ship, a shockwave that spread out like a tidal wave across the space around them. Every ship in the fleet, every fighter, every gun aimed at them, all felt the shockwave's immense power. The Dominion ships, caught within the blast radius, exploded in blinding flashes, their hulls incinerated by the unrelenting force. The Black Leviathan trembled, its systems overloading, but it held together for just long enough for Voss to see the full extent of their destruction. The heart of the Thalzur capital, Ishtar, was exposed, vulnerable. The mighty defenses that had once protected their empire were crumbling, and before them a vast citadel lay in ruins. "We've done it," Sela said, awe in her voice. "The Dominion's center of power is shattered." But the cost had been enormous. The Leviathan was dying. Its hull was cracking, systems failing. The core that had released the shockwave was burning out, and there was no way to keep it together much longer. Voss turned to his crew, his face a mask of determination. "Prepare to make our exit. We'll take the escape pods to the surface. The war is ours. Humanity has won." Sela's voice faltered for the first time. "We're not going to make it off this ship, are we?" Voss's gaze softened. "It doesn't matter." The message is clear. The Dominion is finished. Humanity is free. As the Leviathan systems began to fail, the escape pods jettisoned into space, carrying the survivors down toward the planet below. And from the wreckage of the Black Leviathan, humanity's victory was felt across the stars. The Thalzir Dominion had fallen. Epilogue. The war was over. The galaxy would never be the same. On the surface of Eshtor, Voss and his remaining crew stood among the ruins of the once mighty Dominion capital. They had shattered an empire, but more than that, they had reclaimed their future. Humanity, once scattered and oppressed, now stood at the dawn of a new era, a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would remember the day the Titans of Earth marched to war, and the stars, once so cold, would never forget the fire they had sparked.